According to a recent demographic survey by the American Bar, there are about 1.3 million lawyers in the United States. 49% are solo, 76% are small firms. So the stats depict a departure from a traditional concept of the legal landscape. Things are changing, but the real question is, are lawyers changing too? Legal services, advocacy work, what it means to be a lawyer has changed more in the last 20 years than in the last 200, thanks to the way consumers behave online, disrupted industries, and a changing perception around access to justice. In a world flattened by technology, the role of expertise is being replaced by experience. Consumers looking for services online are on the hunt for speed and ease and are less tolerant of barriers and more open for workarounds. Lawyers can be the source of disruptive change in their industry, or they can get disrupted. What if the future and flexibility of solo law is the future of law itself? Let's find out.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by Consultwebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that knows Greedo had it coming. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest in personal and professional developments. I am your analog robo-host, Jake Sanders, and with me is the Obi-Wan of AdWords, Paul Julius. Paul, what's happening?
Don't try it, Jakeakin. I have the high ground.
Oh, and this is right before you chop my legs off and throw me into a volcano.
Yes, absolutely. I've been waiting to say that to you for I don't know how long.
So bizarre. This is the moment you've been waiting for?
I think, I haven't been waiting exactly this moment, but I guess it just seemed, I don't know, semi-appropriate.
Hey, you see your shot. You're not going to miss it. What is on the show today?
On the show today, we talk about the changing landscape of legal services and their physical locations with an article from myshingle.com. We interview lawyer, podcaster, and nerd impresario Mike Whalen about what being solo means for lawyers now and in the future. And we take Mike to the holodeck for the virtually strenuous 5 questions that we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The article today is from myshingle.com. It's by Carolyn Elephant. She has an amazing site. I suggest everybody go check this out for solo and small firms. Bunch of great resources. An amazing writer about legal tech innovations and stuff, so follow her. But this article, the brief overview, is the physical locations people are experiencing. Engagements with lawyers are changing. With digital, the libraries and file rooms are starting to disappear. Workspaces are favoring more open design, collaborative layouts, rather than the dark, boxed-in leather libraries. I really enjoyed this, and it helped me conceive of what it's like to be a solo lawyer, maybe going to a WeWork place or going to an office share and slanging law and how that's changing. What did you take away from it? What were your thoughts, Paul?
I think particularly in law, like it's a lot easier for like people in our industry, like advertising, marketing, stuff like that. Like we've always been nomadic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We work in such a virtual, not virtual reality, but
Right.
it's the digital space, and that's everywhere or anywhere. So it's not necessarily like this isn't hard for me to make a leap to. But I think lawyers have always had this, I have a secretary, I have an office, I have a place that I go to in my suit. And that's changing. And I think that they may be like, a late adapter here. But I think it's interesting, a lot of it is, like she says in there, I have the luxury of putting my needs first when it comes to office space. Clients aren't going to be showing up 24/7. or, you know, 8, you know, during office hours, like office hours, even office hours are having that's losing any meaning, you know?
It's an interesting point just to think of the physical locations, because it
Mhm.
hints at a larger changing landscape that I feel is sort of adapting to client delivery lifestyle, and actually just lifestyles. I just think there's a lot of preconceived notions of what being a lawyer means and what it feels like and what it should
Yeah.
contain, and the
Yeah.
kind of perceptions that need to kind of come from your job. And talking later with Mike Whalen, we discovered that the smallest percentage of the legal population in the United States is doing big law, which is this corporate, it feels like the older law. And the majority of folks are doing solo and small work. They don't necessarily have the ability to do that, but they're strapped down with the conception that that's what they need. So adapting, legal services to the changing way that people behave online, I think is what's headed up.
So to just play the devil's advocate side of this, you know, Jake, you and I have talked a lot about how everything you do is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
How your suit, you know, how you present yourself, how you interact with people
It's
on
important.
social media.
Yeah.
Is this part of that? I mean, what if we, you know, we always say how your office looks, how the lobby, how the waiting room is, how you treat people. Well, if you don't have that, is that an aspect now? Are you losing something?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, it's like you have your diploma on the inside of your jacket and you just show them,
Right,
because you don't have a wall to hang.
Right, exactly my point. Like, is this? It's just weird. Like, I can see people will be like, "Yeah, that seems kind of nice," but
So here's something. Think of the client going
Mhm.
into an office versus going into a large, bulky place with a bunch of suits and a bunch of books. It seems like it's a power play for me personally,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I'm throwing this down. So, later on, Mike Whalen talks about good enough law, which is just being smart about the law just enough over your client to hold it over them. And
hmm
in some way, I think the older modality of, the behemoth bookshelves and the tight suits, it feels like there's no room for people. I just feel like there's no room for the law to be tackled with a partnership for your client. Your client feels like if they go in and there's a behemoth bookshelf and there's all these suits, there's powerlessness inside of your client, because they're like, well, obviously I don't wear a suit. I don't have giant books. I don't have any of this. None of this is real to me. I'm dealing with a legal problem that's even further from reality for me. So I'm using you as this medium to help me transmit to this larger construct. And I think big law keeps the idea of this mothership of law, whereas a small small practicing lawyer could say, hey, let's go grab a coffee and let's talk about your problems. Now that seems like there's a partnership. The future is controllable and I can understand it on a human level. And I have this lawyer who's an advocate for me. What? I'm thinking that if you don't see the ability there, or you don't see the niche opportunity for you to jump in there and help people deal with their legal problems as another human.
But like Mike talks about later, part of being an expert, if you want to do the expert definition, is exclusivity. You don't talk to me in a coffee shop because I don't hang out in coffee shops where you are. You won't. I'm not accessible except through this way for $600 an hour or whatever.
Dude, you know what? And you're absolutely right. And so the real future of law is for lawyers to decide.
Yeah.
You can't have both of
Yes.
have both of those realities, which I think a lot of we're experiencing heavy cognitive dissonance in the lawyers versus business owners. And there's this dichotomy here, but it really needs to be, what type of business does a lawyer want to own? Then you have to make that decision. Is it an expert business? Is it more around access to justice or access to legal counsel? But in our interview with Mike, he talks about the future of law firms, and he lays it out there with Star Trek metaphors.
Oh yeah.
We talk about how maybe the legal landscape can shift and lawyers can shift their perceptions with it. So let's head to the interview.
Let's check it out.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
We really have a relationship with Consultwebs that goes beyond simple business-to-business marketing. We have grown up with them as a company. They were there for us when we started. We were there for them when they started.
So I think that we were Consultwebs' first personal injury client 15 or 16 years ago.
I've been working with them directly for 10 years now, and they've always been a fantastic partner.
It's vitally important to us that when somebody says you should hire Bellick & Fox, and they go to the Bellick & Fox website, they're going to go beyond the website and contact us.
They understand storytelling, they understand technology, they understand a website isn't just text on a page, it's how you create an expectation for what that means to work with us.
When we get a case, they are very excited in a really genuine way that I think reflects the fact that they sort of view their success tied to ours. So that's why we've continued to use them.
I've never had anything but praise for how they've been able to market our website.
Go to consultwebs.com to learn more.
And now, for a lawsome interview.
Mike Whalen got his JD from the University of Texas School of Law and is an attorney, podcaster, nerd impresario, and founder of the Whalen Law Firm. Mike is also the founder of the Lawyer Forward Conference, an annual legal marketing mindshare event held in Austin, Texas, that's entering into its 5th year. From his insights on managing a small practice, his transparent tweets on bookkeeping, and his excellent articles outlining the frustrations and future of law, we're honored to have Mike Whalen on the show today. Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm pretty good. I find bios very strange, but I thank my mom for writing that one. It was very good, and I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Mom, shout out to Mom.
What up, Mom?
So you recently launched your solo practice, and you talk a lot about marketing. I just love following your tweets because you just bring such a kind of you drop in the airs, and it's just like there's a human here talking to me about legal marketing. We emailed back and forth. You mentioned hearing a few podcasts from Brian Clark, Seth Godin, wizards of the marketing world. So you wanted to talk about the differences in between solopreneur and freelancer. And just let us know why lawyers should pay attention to the distinction.
I do. Let me start with why I'm annoyed, because I tend to do that. If you ever, just by the way, if you go to the Lawyer Forward blog right now, you'll notice some patterns like when my blogging is up and when it's down. And a lot of times when it's down, people are like, oh, he must be really busy. Good for him and his family. It's not true. It's just that there's an extended period in which I'm happy. I write when I'm mad at things.
Yeah.
And that tends to motivate me. Right now, I got so irritated, I decided to write a book. So I'm like in the midst of writing a book about this issue that I brought up. But can I tell you real quickly, like, the things that annoyed me that got my engine churning on this?
Oh, yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I know you guys have mentioned this several times on the podcast, Clio released their legal trends report. You guys remember that, where there's,
yes.
Lawyers are only billing 1.8 hours a day or whatever, and they're only collecting 1.6. Yep. So, side note, at that conference, I showed up and my friend Joshua Lennon said, hey, come move up to the front. And I was like, why would I move up to the front? He said, you're media. I said, I am not media. He said, you've got a podcast, you've got a blog in a market that we care about. Come move up front. I said, bro, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So I go up front, and on Twitter, I am ranting about everything because I'm just annoyed. Like, I just get annoyed about things.
Yeah.
This specific thing annoyed me. Poor Jack was up there talking about how groundbreaking this legal trends report was. And specifically, he mentioned this amount of hours that we are or are not billing. And when George, who works there, talked about it, he introduced it with the Druckerism, what gets measured gets managed, implying that we should keep track of what he's calling this utilization rate with how much these lawyers are used, because this is so important and we need to take care of this. And I was like, let me drop another Druckerism on you. There's nothing worse than efficiently doing the wrong thing. And so my brain is sitting here thinking about that amount of hours that we bill and collect only matters if it matters, right? And a lot of that really depends on what kind of business model you have. So what's been bothering me, fellas, that I wanted to talk to you about, you hear this every time you go to a legal conference, especially targeted to solos. All solos are entrepreneurs, which just irritates the bejesus out of me. Take those two things that I just mentioned. One, that all lawyers are entrepreneurs, and two, only billing 1 point something hours a day is bad, right? The assumption behind that is that those two things can overlap. And as I'm working on this book, I realize not every solo is an entrepreneur. And the more we use that term, the more we screw up our perceptions about what we're supposed to be doing every day. And on the flip side, when we freak out about the amount of hours we're billing each day, as an owner of a law firm, we're also potentially freaking out about the wrong thing depending on business model. So that's what the book is that I'm writing about, and that's what's got my mind churning is what kind of work we should be doing each day based on the business model. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. And so in regards to Brian Clark and Seth Godin, did you just use those as a framework to kind of like put around the ideas of entrepreneurial behavior?
Yeah. So side note, again, Brian Clark used to be an attorney. He was an attorney
Wow,
in
I didn't know that.
Austin. Yeah, he was an attorney in Austin. Absolutely hated it. And then he started a company called Copyblogger, which he had a business model of content to services to software. And now he's later in that. He's got a big business. He's got a lot of employees. It's going really well. So I went to a conference of his. I think it was called the Authority Conference in Denver. And he got up there, and he knows who I am and that I'm an attorney. He got up there and was talking about marketing and building a business and writing a bunch of content and being the personality for your business. And I tweeted, "Where's the time to do law stuff? When do you do law stuff?"
Mm-hmm.
And he retweeted me and said, "You don't," right? So to him, you don't do the stuff. You're not making stuff. And in that, he had a conversation. In that light, he had a conversation with Seth Godin. You guys know who Seth Godin is, I assume?
Oh, big time.
Yeah. I had a marketing person that I had hired that literally I fired because she didn't know who Seth Godin was.
Good choice.
I was like, bro, this is kind of basic stuff. Okay. But yeah, Seth Godin is he's been around for a while, writes a bunch of marketing stuff. Seth Godin has identified himself through his career as a freelancer. And Brian Clark, through his career, has identified himself as a solopreneur. So the two of them had conversations about what the distinctions are between those two things and why that distinction matters. The best summary that Godin gave during this conversation was freelancers make stuff and solopreneurs make decisions. And in that conversation, they were talking about why the overlap really screws you up when you're thinking about both of them. And it just got me churning and thinking about with lawyers, like, I know you guys talked to Jillian Hadfield about this.
Mm-hmm.
All we know when someone goes to law school is that they're interested in law stuff, right? We don't know anything about what kind of business they want to run, what kind of personality they have. We just know they like law stuff. And then we wedge them in to this one track and this one model. And we end up in the end with a bunch of people who have some substantive knowledge, but really don't know what the heck to do with it. And this solopreneur versus freelancer, I'm always thinking in terms of solo attorneys, just because that's where I come from. Don't talk to me about big law. Those people are weird and drive $200,000 cars that in neighborhoods you can only drive 35 miles an hour in. It makes no sense.
Or worse, they're on a horse,
Is that
with a riding crop and a giant hat and a feather plume? I mean, in a marching band, it gets out.
I was talking to Jordan Furlong that he was talking at one of these big law conferences and they were playing polo in the background. He's like, "Let me call you back later." Okay, none of that happened, but I don't know if big firm lawyers actually do any of that stuff. But anyway, so we teach all of these lawyers, not just in law school, but afterwards in CLEs, we say these things to people that really the only thing we know is that they're interested in law stuff. We have no idea what kind of business they want to run. We don't know if they want to make stuff or make decisions. And when I've heard podcast interviews that you guys have had where people will say things like lawyers need to X. And we talk about lawyers as this big monolith, like we're all trying to do the same thing and run the same business. So in writing this book, I have realized I've created this taxonomy of two types of this solopreneur access focused business and this freelancer expertise focused business.
Talking about the future of law, you mention in one of our transactions, The Business of Expertise by David Baker. And if we're talking about the difference in between expert business and freelancer business, how does that work more in the law? And how can lawyers kind of what can they take away from those two differences?
Yeah, that's a great book. And I would recommend anybody, pausing this and reading that book. If you're driving, buy it on Audible. It's a pretty good read on Audible, but a great book. I run the Lawyer Forward Conference, and it's targeted mostly to solos. And I guarantee you, if I took a survey of that room, how many of you are experts? How many of you run an expert business? Every one of them would raise a hand. But there is a question in that book, The Business of Expertise, where Baker says, are the majority of your clients coming from within 50 miles of your office? He says, if they are, then you are not an expert business, you are a service business, which is just kind of mind-blowing for lawyers because most of our clients do come from within 50 miles. We think we're running an expert business, but really we're trying to be right in front of them. And that's this dichotomy that he's defining, like, are you trying to be right there in front of people, available to them all the time, or are you trying to work your brain so that you are a deep expert and people feel the need to come to you? They're two totally different business models, two totally different approaches, and two totally different things you should be working on a day-to-day basis.
Jake, you had some, that sounds a lot like what you experienced when you were working at your old law firm. Like you were just, they were so well known. Even like people would go and ask them stuff. I remember you telling me people would ask stuff that had nothing to do. Like, we don't handle divorce cases, but we still want to ask you because you're the lawyer. We know you. You're the guy.
Well, and wasn't it weird that it was the confluence? So just some backup, Mike. We did a bunch of TV advertising, pretty large market. We kind of projected that expert vibe, and what we got were everybody who needed local legal services were calling us. We only did personal injury, but everybody, all across. I got a contract. I got I got a divorce. I got this thing. I got business stuff, and so we knew that we were generating that activity. But one of the things that our main partner did was like, you have to help these folks and make sure they get hooked up with what they need. Our competition in the same market would hang up. Anybody calls with something that isn't an auto injury, hang up on them because we don't have time. And we did not do that. It was actually this confluence of us putting out the expert vibe, but actually providing local services. So
well, and here's the thing, that this distinction may sound artificial, but the decisions that you make off of it are totally different. And what I realized as I'm going through this and I'm thinking about this is access and expertise are not compatible. You can't have both of them. They butt heads with each other. So I'll give the example that I read about recently, the text a lawyer thing that's been going around. I think Bob Ambrogi wrote about it recently, and I know Dan Lear's been talking about it. So there is a great example. If you text a lawyer, right, this is an access play. This is an audience. I'm getting right in front of you, an entrepreneurial access play. What can you give those people with that quick access? All that those people get is text back and forth, meaning not deep expertise, not applied to their situation. They're all shallow answers because that's all they can be.
Right.
That is access. That's how I'm defining an access play. Expertise is different. Expertise is applied knowledge. It's knowledge derived from patterns. What Baker talks about in that Business of Expertise business book over and over again is it's all about the pattern recognition. That's where wisdom comes from. It's when you can layer on those case studies to be able to then develop informed opinions to give to people, that wisdom that they can give to people that they can then test and go try. most of us, if we're being honest, most lawyers who think we are practicing expert law are really only practicing what I would call good enough law. We just know enough to know more than the person we're selling to, which is certainly a business model. And for an access business, that might be a fine business model. You can have a profitable transaction knowing just more than the person who needs your help. But that is not an expert play. That is a fundamentally different business model. And if you try to chase both of them at the same time, you're not able to serve your clients with what they want.
That's intense.
Oh my God, that is so good. Oh my God.
That's crazy. The texting thing, it's funny. I used to run a lot of AdWords campaigns, and there you can actually have a message extension. So it would even be like right in the ad where you could directly text the firm, and it's funny to hear you say that, because I always wondered, like, beyond saying, "Hey, can you call me back?" Like, what's the point? What are we gonna do? You know?
Right.
But anyway, so you run your own firm, and you're really vocal about the process, and you offer behind the scenes access, blog about it so others can share in the experience. You said you wanted to speak on the implications of being one type of business or another, hiring, business education systems and stuff like that. What
Sure.
does the future of law and flexibility have in common?
Well, so I'll say this. It is plausible that we can have a hybrid model of this access and expertise business, but let's just accept for now that those two things don't really work together very well, and let's separate them. So assuming they're two different kinds of businesses, which is what I'm operating on, there are huge implications for how you make decisions. You guys talked about some of them, like if I am a local personal injury firm and I put a bunch of ads in, and then I get a whole bunch of phone calls, like, what's really the purpose of this thing? So let's some specifics. When I went to that same Clio conference, the Law Hawk was there. You guys know the Law Hawk?
Love the Law Hawk.
Yeah.
Law Hawk. Brian is one crazy dude. So, which, by the way, every time I have met him and talked to him, he throws off that frat boy party vibe, and he just owns it. Like, I try to have like a normal conversation. I'm like, the weather is really crazy outside. He's like, let's drink. It's really odd. But anyway, so when he was at the conference, they asked him to stand up and talk about his experience making these commercials, right? And he got up and he talked about all the crazy things that happened in the Taco Bell thing and the Super Bowl and all this craziness.
Right.
And after this long conversation with lots of jokes and lots of fun, somebody raised their hand and said, "Okay, do you get any clients from this?" And he laughed and was like, "No, let's drink." The answer is no. They asked him, what percentage of the people who call you are actual potential clients? And he was like, I don't know, 1 or 2%. So they said, well, what the heck are they calling you for? Why are these people calling you? He said, I don't know, a bunch of them want me to record their voicemails for their buddies, which is just like, I don't know what the business model is there, but you see all these lawyers, they're paying these legal marketing services, for example, to get phone calls, which if you're an expert business, phone calls don't mean jack. Phone calls are useless. What you need are profitable clients that need you specifically. So marketing, that's a great differentiator between the two different business models. Are you trying to be in front of everybody? Are you inviting? Are you trying to get a ton of phone calls? Or is your marketing primarily an active exclusion? You're trying to limit down to the people who actually need your expertise, right? So your marketing is handled totally differently. Hiring, who's your first hire? If you are the access business, I'm bringing a bunch of audience, then the first hire I would make, which we'll talk about in a minute, is what I call a legal supply chain manager, which is basically a project manager with some understanding of how you source work and how you design work, but that's a person that will divvy work out as it comes into you. If you're an expert business, the first hire I would make would be a personal assistant, somebody who, gets your kids' health forms filled out, because that person's play is very different. It's very much about that expert's time. Or on intake, again, what is the difference in the relationship in that communication? Are you saying, I come to you, let me get to you in that text a lawyer kind of way. Let me come to you wherever you are. Again, that's an access play versus, oh no, you don't get to talk. You have to apply to talk to me. Here are the steps you need to go through to convey that expertise. And, I mentioned it's plausible that a person could make a hybrid of these models, and it's plausible that this format, this distinction that I'm making is not that useful. But we need, I read an article recently from Ken Grady where he said we need some theories in law, some things that we can test, some things that we can try to see if they work. And you talked about flexibility and moving forward. There's a book called On Grand Strategy. And in the book, he makes reference to that line from the movie Lincoln, where Tommy Lee Jones's character asks Lincoln, after trying to get the 13th Amendment passed and going through all these machinations to make it happen, just ugly kind of under the table deals. He says, how do you get something so noble done through such terrible means, and how do you justify that? And Lincoln said, well, it's really good to have a compass, and it will always point you north, but it says nothing about the marshes and swamps on your road, right? So you simultaneously have to have some kind of guiding principle. And that's what I'm trying to develop with this access versus expertise business, some kind of guiding principle that gets you started. And then I expect you to be able to adapt, to be flexible to what comes, but you've got to have principles to operate out of.
If lawyers need to embrace this business owner reality, you as a business owner, you're constantly sharing the knowledge that you come across on social. You talked about the levers, finding levers and experts that lawyers can use to help them better use their time. So tell us more about those levers and how lawyers can use those to help them.
Right. And let me be clear. The levers, again, are very different for somebody trying to run an expert business versus somebody trying to run an access business.
Sure.
So, and I should say, when I speak of access, we use this word so nebulously in law, and nobody really knows what we're talking about when we use the word access. I may be talking about access to justice, actually, when we say that a business is focused on access. We may not just be talking about texting lawyers and being available by phone. We may be talking about literal getting people knowledge quickly that they need and simplifying the system. That business model, again, is totally different. You hear Sam Glover talk about this on Lawyerist all the time. There is a difference between access to a lawyer and access to justice. In that dichotomy, to me, access to a lawyer is access to an expert. These are just different ideas, and the more we try to conflate them, the more screwed up we get. But assuming that what you want to build is an expert business, assuming that what you want to do is charge premium rates because you can't be replaced. That's one of the assumptions of an expert business, is no one can do it but you, right? They will come to you because you give something so unique in the marketplace that no one else can do it. By the way, you can't be the divorce lawyer and this workout. That is not a practice area, is not a business plan. A practice area is not a niche. A practice area is just a subject matter that you learn about, right? That's an area of knowledge, not an area of expertise. You got to dig down. But anyway, assuming you want to build that business, the levers, getting back to Cleo's report, that an expert business can pull, one would be your number of hours, right? So if you're an expert and you're primarily charging for, I hate to use the word time because I hate the billable hour, but if you're charging for the time you spend being an expert, which again may not be the billable hour, if you're trying to focus your time on being an expert, then do more of that, right? So step one would be to eliminate everything that is not you spending time being an expert. So if you're doing administrative things, cut that stuff out. If you're dealing with kids' forms for healthcare for their field trip, cut that stuff out. Whatever it is that is making it so you and your life don't have expert hours, cut that stuff out viciously and get down to those expert hours. Number two is to be able to charge more for the hours you spend, right? So to get to the point that you have those premium rates. And Baker talks about that again. It's positioning. It's being so useful to a very specific group of people with a specific problem that they have to pay you. If somebody is willing to text you and pay you $15 to get an answer, that should tell you something about what that knowledge that you have is worth to that person. It's not worth much, right? So you have to increase your expertise so that you can charge a premium rate. And then third, what Brian Clark was talking about, capture your expertise. You think about Seth Godin. What's funny about Seth Godin and Brian Clark is I think if I told most lawyers, hey, you're a freelancer expert, they would think, no, that's an insult. I'm an entrepreneur. That sounds French, and French is fancy. I like French, right? They are insulted by the idea of being a freelancer. Seth Godin is a freelancer, and he is way more well known than Brian Clark is. And the reason is because he captured his expertise. He published, he got the information out there and shared it. So those are the three broad levers that you have as an expert. You spend more time being an expert, you focus so that you can charge more as an irreplaceable expert, and you capture that expertise and get it out to the world to both prove your expertise, to build your expertise, and to capture some other revenue streams for that expertise.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so just kind of thinking about it, if I wanted to do an expert business and I wanted to charge more through positioning, the only way I could do that is to create content. The more content I have, it seems like the more people will be reaching out to me. And now I'm back on this access thing. It's just interesting because if I really wanted to draw attention to my expertise, I'd have to kind of co-opt some access biz kind of machination, marketing stuff.
Maybe
just
again,
just putting it out there.
Again, you think of Seth Godin, nobody's calling Seth Godin, right? If you go to Seth Godin's website, there is not a button on the top right side that's on every freaking lawyer website that says call now, right?
Yeah,
there is no phone number.
Good point.
It used to be you could access him by email because he was a crazy person and would literally respond to every email. But he just got to the point that he was too big. He just couldn't do it anymore. Real experts, you can't get to those people. But they come to you through these broad-based kind of content efforts. And again, that was part of what bugged me about that Clio Legal Trends report is if I spend a full day, if I spend 8 hours writing a book, according to that metric of hours, of billable hours, I wasted my day. But in terms of building an expert business, there's nothing I could do that would be worth more to me in the long run than sitting down, crafting maybe offensive opinions, but at least opinions that strike people as worth discussing. There's nothing worth more than sitting down and doing that in a book. That's a day well spent.
Some of it too is you have to limit that, like you were saying with Seth. We see it in marketing. We see people where apply now to see if you qualify. You have to make this limited quantity that only certain people can access. You know what I mean? And kind of build that up a little bit to kind of play on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly scaled ways to do it, right? Like a person, again, that third lever, you can write books and you can do seminars and you can have a podcast and you can get out into the world. There are scaled ways to not only communicate your expertise, but also to get paid. I mean, there are ways that a person can do that. And we've got great examples, including Seth Godin out in the world doing that. I am not saying lock yourself up in a room and never talk to people. What I am saying is your time, that day that was spent writing a book, is spent creating an asset that goes on beyond the time that you die. If you write a book that is really driven by principles and has these eternal evergreen principles and ideas, and you take strong opinions, not here's 300 words on how to calculate child support, that stuff is useless, but on let me give you deep, thoughtful opinions, that is a day well spent. It will make you way more money than spending 8 hours billing, even at $300, $400 an hour.
So that leads us into the last question here. You tweeted a few weeks ago about lawyering in the Star Trek economy. For non-nerds, can you introduce that metaphor and then assume a standard orbit around the topic, meaning why lawyers should become connected experts?
Sure. So briefly, this came from a couple of things in my life. And the first one was an article written by Nilofer Merchant. She is a speaker. She talks about the future of work, and she spoke for TED for TED Talks. And she wrote this article on TED's website. It was the 50th anniversary, I think, of Star Trek. And so a bunch of people were writing articles about how close are we to that Star Trek future. Everybody else that wrote an article wrote about tech, right? They wrote about iPhones and lasers and starships. She wrote about the social change. And what she was asking was, as much as we've made progress on the technical stuff, we have not gotten to the point where we have experts happily working on what they're really good at, connected by technology to one common end, right? So in Star Trek, for those of you who don't know, there is no money in the world of the Federation in this future. There's no money, meaning the only capital, the thing that makes people more prominent than others, is social capital. It's accomplishments. It's looking cool because you flew a spaceship to another planet and had sex with a green lady, right? It's you're making decisions, you're doing human work, and it's all based on social capital. Well, the argument that I would make is that we're just about there, right? That even though we have money in our society, if you read the book Capital by Thomas Piketty, in reality, capital is only the differentiator for a select few. The capital is so focused, like cash capital, money capital, is so focused in so few people that for the rest of us who are running our own law practice, money is a consequence, right? Money is not our power. That's not our lever. Social capital is our lever. And so I think we're there. So I look at what Nilofer Merchant said, and where she said, if you want to leverage social capital, you connect with other experts via technology to get to one common end. That sounds a lot like the supply chain to me. And I worked for, just so you know, 10 years or so before law school in transportation. And so my brain thinks about that. If my daughter goes to Walmart and wants a doll, there is no guy at that Walmart calling the factory in China and saying, hey, guy who works for Walmart as well, can you make a doll and ship me a doll? And everybody on that chain works for Walmart. That's not how it works, right? There is a factory, and they're connected to Walmart's demand algorithm so they know that a doll is needed. That factory then connects to a trucking company, to a shipping company, to a rail company, to a truck. Those are all experts. They're individual businesses. They're distinct and are really good at what they do, but they're connected by technology to get to that doll to my daughter. And that's what I'm advocating for in this book. And I've been talking about it since the first Lawyer Forward conference. The future that I envision is not Uber for lawyers. That's not what I'm talking about. I know that you had a conversation previously about scaling out and lawyers connecting on different technology tools if they have, cases that are too big. I'm not talking about capacity. That's not what I'm saying. That's important and great. Access businesses should develop that ability. I'm saying to you people who want to be experts, you can do it. If you want to become the cow expert in a divorce, the person who knows about cattle, you can do that. But in order to do it, if you live in Beeville, Texas, in the middle of nowhere, there are not enough cases in Beeville, Texas for you to be the cow lawyer in Texas, right? You just can't do that. If you want to be the accidental gopher fight death accident person lawyer, right? Personal injury lawyer, you can't do that in New Jersey. There's just not enough work for that. You have to become an expert and connect to other experts via technology. My hope is that the access businesses will learn the legal supply chain so that as they get customers in, they can say, sure, we'll serve you. But then that they've got trained legal supply chain managers who will say, now let me connect to the experts who will work few hours on this case, but deliver such incredible value that they can get paid well and the customer is happier. That's the Star Trek economy vision that I have, the legal supply chain vision that I have. And it just requires that those who want to be experts will become experts, and those who want to focus on access for consumers will focus on that.
I know we're running out of time, but I had one question about bar associations. Do you feel like, because I hopped in on a thread once when we were talking about, lawyers need to be entrepreneurs. And I was like, no, they don't, because it just feels like we're alone. Entrepreneurs, like no one cares enough about this business. Not like me. I had to skip out on all my vacations. I have to, because I'm living and dying, building my business.
Right.
Does the bar associations writ large or on a state level kind of basis, do you feel that they have something to offer lawyers, or just what's your thought on bar associations? Because we have an ability to kind of consolidate everybody, and maybe we're just not using the bar association stuff right. What's your thoughts on bar association?
Oh, consolidating everybody is the biggest issue. Like we talked about before, Ben Barton talked about this in a study where he compared medical and legal, and he pointed out in this article the number of people who have a JD but who end up practicing law. The distance between those two numbers is crazy, because again, all we know about the people who graduate law school and pass the bar exam is that they're people who can graduate from law school and pass a bar exam, right? We don't know anything about those people. State bars, I should caveat this with, I'm in Texas. It's a mandatory state bar. And I guess the way I would phrase it is there are good people inside that monstrosity, right? I'm not entirely blaming a state bar. I've heard Patrick Pallas talk about this elsewhere. The state bar theoretically serves the consumer, but the people paying the state bar's bills are the lawyers, which means they have two constituent groups who are frequently at odds with each other. Serving one does not necessarily mean serving the other. And most of the state bars, maybe because of time, maybe because of money, a lot of the state bar leadership is coming from big law firm environments, which again is a totally different business model. It was created by Paul Cravath in response to his case with Westinghouse and Edison. It's an inventor factory model. It's a very different model than what the solopreneur or the expert freelancer business is dealing with. The advice that applies to the inventor factory business is fundamentally different than the advice that applies to the expert freelancer business. We can't talk to those groups as if they're the same. And what I'm hoping, and I know was called for by Jillian and others, is that we'll end up in law taking that mass of people who care about law and saying, well, here's a defined and legislated role for you, a regulated role for you. Here's a role for you. Here's a role for you. All of you help solve this legal problem, but you don't all have to be called lawyer experts. In the meantime, that's still the world that we're in. We still have, if you want to be a solopreneur who runs a legal business, who monetizes through legal services, you have to be a lawyer. So what I'm talking about in this book is I'm taking the situation as it is. It is still that you have to be a lawyer to be involved anywhere in the legal industry. And I am saying, pick your poison, pick the broad business model that you want to do, and then let's get everybody connected so that we can get to that desired end for the client.
So let's wrap it up. How can people, when is this book coming out?
It depends on how angry he gets, right?
I know. Let's get this guy real mad so we can get a book out.
Finish that book.
Preach that. Yeah. No, so the conference, the Lawyer Forward conference, is every January in Austin. I believe this year it's the 24th to the 26th in Austin. My intention is to have the book kind of soft launch to that group at that point, and then we'll kind of go wide with it over the next year. What I would point people to, if you go to lawyerforward.com/book updates, you guys noted I really like to work out loud. I really like to just stumble through it and be very public about it. What I intend to do is if you go sign up for that email list, I'm going to be sending out sample chapters of the book as I work through it. I'm going to be asking for some feedback. I'll also, as I'm developing this book, I'm interviewing different firms who are playing with these models and different experts inside legal who have opinions about these models. I won't be able to fit all of that in that book. So I'm hoping to put some of that content out through that email list. So if you'll go to lawyerforward.com/book updates, you can get all that information. And then I'll also be asking for some beta readers who will be able to get the book for free and then communicate what they do and don't like about it through reviews and such to try to help get these ideas out into the world. So go to lawyerforward.com/book updates and sign up there.
5 questions we ask everyone.
All right, here we go. 5 questions we ask everyone.
Wait,
1.
what happened to 10?
It's
no,
now
sorry.
5 questions.
Give the full title.
5 questions that used to be 10 questions we ask everyone.
I got it. The Keanu Reeves question better be in there or I'm going to be pissed and write a blog post about it. Okay, go.
All right, well, blog post incoming. Number 1, what was the last book you read?
I'm rereading a lot of books. I just got through The Fuzzy and The Techie again. Highly recommend that one.
All right. Number 2, what is your favorite place?
That area at the top of my internet browser where all those tabs are of things I'm going to read eventually.
Nice.
Great answer. Number 3.
I'm never going to read them.
It's things I'm going
nice
to
to be
close
there.
out in 20 minutes. What sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
Right now, the Harvard Business Review and the Atlantic for reporting, and I'll promote Brian Clark's podcast, Unemployable, for those of you who want to build these solopreneur and expert businesses.
Number 4. If you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would it be?
Nutella.
Number 5. After a long day or a long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
I mostly hang out with my wife. I really enjoy her. And so we spend a ton of time together. I'm not one of those empty nest people. I can't wait till my kids freaking get out so we can travel all over the world and hang out together. So mostly spending time with my wife.
For show notes, links, and info, follow us on Twitter or Facebook, or go to www.consultwebs.com/lawsomepodcast. Be sure to leave us a review and ratings on iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.